I know I've said before that it's very, very windy, but today is exceptionally windy, as you can probably hear. We've talked about why you never start writing your music in the first place. We've talked about why you never finish writing your music. And this is an additional perspective to why you never finish writing your music. Quite different from the one we spoke of before. And perhaps more accurately, this topic is about why you're afraid to finish writing your music. So we all human beings operate in a field of potential. And not only do we occupy a reality where we do things, we also occupy a space of potential. We know what we might be able to do or what we might be able to pursue. And I think that space of potential is exceptionally heightened for creative individuals. And creative people are very good at identifying that potential and perhaps manipulating that potential into actuality. And to be able to recognize the potential of something, that's a great, great thing. But the problem with it is that if it doesn't manifest into actuality, then it's not really worth much. It can be entertaining for you up here, or it can be entertaining if you discuss those ideas with someone else who shares that perspective and shares that enthusiasm. But ultimately, if you never make anything of it, then the usefulness of that potential is very limited. And one of my passions is to be able to help people turn their potential into something actual. Because the benefits of that, not only for you, but for everyone around you, especially all of your fans and all of your listeners, the upside of that potential, if it were to manifest itself in an actual way in this world, the upside of that is so immense that there's really nothing that compares. And if everyone manifested their potential into actuality in this reality, then the world would be a very, very different place. And I'd argue that it would be a far better place. So while mapping out and trying to understand all the potential that is around you and all the potential that you could achieve, well, that's great. If you only stay in potential land, that's going to be a big problem for you, because ultimately that alone is not enough for an individual. We need to see our goals and dreams actually manifest in front of our eyes to be able to identify progress and meaning. And ultimately, if all your music is potential, then you won't be able to move your career forward, and you won't be able to develop your musical language and your actual skills. I've talked about before how important it is to finish your music, to finish all the projects you work on. Not because they will all be magnificent, but most importantly, because that ensures progress. I know a lot of musicians are going to relate to the feeling of sitting there at your desk with your instrument in front of your computer, listening to whatever you have done up until to this point. And you're afraid to touch it, you're afraid to work on it, and you probably find that you'd much rather simply sit there with your song, just kind of taking in its magnificence, and you're not moving forward with that track. And most commonly, it's not really because you don't know how. You probably have skills and perspectives that you could utilize in order to take the music forward, but you don't. And that reason is because you're afraid to turn it into something real. Because as long as it's there on your hard drive, on your computer, on your desk, it could be anything, and it can fulfill all of the deepest dreams and desires of your heart and your soul and your mind. Because if you push it forwards, then it actually needs to fold back into this existence. It needs to manifest in this reality in some form. And ultimately that form is going to be audio coming out of the speakers. And if it doesn't convey and communicate the story and the feeling that you want it to do, then that's a failure. Then your effort falls short of the perfect, idealized goals that you have for that music. And most musicians don't want to face that reality because it can be crushing, it can be depressing, it can be very frustrating. So instead, you just much rather have that song on your computer, on your hard drive, on your desk, being in a form that's ambiguous and enigmatic. You want to keep it in that sort of gray, formless state, because now you don't have to face the shortcomings and issues that are actually inherent in your songwriting, your composition, your production, your mixing, whatever else it may be. So it's really not a question of whether you can finish your music, because you always have that possibility. Your skills and your knowledge might be limited, but with whatever you have, you always have the power of completing whatever you're working on. But most will struggle to meet and accept the true nature of where they are in terms of their songwriting skills or production skills or mixing skills. So what is the answer? What should you do instead? Or what can you do to prevent this? My suggestion is for people, to the best of their ability, to try and deal with realities, to try and deal with actualities, instead of trying to deal with ideas and simulations and romanticized and glorified versions of what's actually there in front of you. And that's a pretty difficult thing to do, because we so easily fall in love with the potential that's in front of us. May that be potential in ourselves or potential in what we're doing. From a creative standpoint, I think it's great and brilliant and necessary to deal with the world of potential when you're writing music. And that's the realm of creative discovery. That's where you can go crazy and pull out all kinds of different sort of ideas. But once that creative process is done, you need to enter the realm of actuality. You need to enter the realm of reality. You need to slowly shift gears. All of that creative potential needs to collapse into something actual that people can, by the press of a button, experience. And when you press play, there's no more questions about what if, or what something could be, or what something might be. The only thing that matters at that point is that audio is coming out of the speakers, and that translates into an effective emotional experience. And in my experience, a music producer's job is to be the mediator between those two realms, the potential and the actuality. And their job, at least in my estimation, should be to be the navigator between the two realms. And to be able to achieve that, you need to build an understanding of mixing and audio theory and audio technology and music production. Now, you might not be interested in that, which is perfectly fine, but then you need to find someone who can be the mediator between those two realms. So if you're a self-governing or kind of a complete full indie artist, you need to be the manager of those two things. You need to understand that there's a time and place to be creative, there's a time and place to write music, but at some point you need to start taking steps that turn those creative ideas into something actual, into something tangible. And you need to realize that those are two very completely separate, different pursuits. And it's difficult to master both of those realms, both of those domains. And that's why making great sounding music is so incredibly difficult. But it's not supposed to be easy. And in my estimation, it's one of the most difficult things you can do. So don't despair. Realize that they're two very different things. They're two quite difficult things. And bringing those together is very challenging. But either way, you're going to have to develop some courage and realize that there's really no reason to be afraid to attack the project and make it ready. If you're afraid to do so, it's because you're afraid to fall short of the idealized perfection that you're pursuing, which is very understandable, and in my estimation, that is what you should be trying to do. You just want to make sure that you're not crippled by your pursuit of absolute perfection, because it rarely exists, and in reality, trying to fight for that relative perfection is going to be really the best you can do. And perhaps maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, you can actually get really close to that absolute perfection. So don't be afraid. Start working, keep your head down, be humble, be disciplined, understand that you can only ever take the steps that are there for you to take. You can only ever make it so good as you possibly can in this current moment in time and space, and realize that this is ultimately the most efficient and fastest way to get better. And in order to make that perfect record one day, you need to get better so that you can make better and better recordings and songs. So don't be afraid of that music collapsing into actuality, because that is inevitable. And if it's not inevitable, then it means that you never finished it in the first place. And that brings us back to the worst thing that can happen, which is that you never finish your music in the first place. So my invitation to you is, don't delay the inevitable. You're gonna have to face the reality of the limitations that are in front of you either way. And that's true whether you're a newbie just starting out or you're a professional who has been doing this for 20, 30 years. There's always a reality waiting for you. There's always a reality that you need to face. And that reality, by definition, comes with limitations. In order for something to be real, it needs to have borders. It needs to have limits. Otherwise, it could be anything, which brings us back to the potential. And of course, shape it, make it better, but don't try and pretend that you're in a different place than where you're actually in. And the best thing you can do for yourself is attack that reality head on and face it with open arms and with realism, with humility, with patience. And if you do that, well, in my estimation, that's the best thing you can do for your music and your career. Finished.